one point, your father left your mother.
It was sudden, and my mother found herself with 4 kids, no money.
Let's talk about IBM for a moment.
We're the champion for business.
When you're meeting with President Trump or other presidents, do you see that CEOs are willing to say, Mr. President, that's not a good idea?
My experience is that people are respectfully honest and give their opinions.
You feel a certain responsibility.
Women do need role models. We're still a small minority that run these companies.
In the stay fit category.
I do box with a person. The difference is he does not get to hit me.
Would you fix your tie, please?
Well, people wouldn't recognize me if my tie was fixed, but okay. Just leave it this way. All right. I don't consider myself a journalist, and nobody else would consider myself a journalist. I began to take on the life of being an interviewer, even though I have a day job of running a private equity firm. How do you define leadership? What is it that makes somebody tick? So when you wake up in the morning, do you say, look at all that I've achieved and I'm incredibly proud of what I've done? Or do you say, geez, I got to deal every day with critics and other things?
What a way to start.
Right?
Okay. I don't think I had either of those thoughts on that first day. I think that first day I just thought about perhaps what an honor it was and what a responsibility it is. And I think people forget IBM is 106 years old, and so you really do get that feeling of, you wake up that morning realizing you're a steward of something. So a different feeling.
At some point when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, IBM was the dominant technology company in the world, and it just...
Still is, David.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Do you think it has the same strength in the computer world that it had in the 60s?
To me, I would answer that IBM is great, but for a reason that you didn't mention. I think the greatness of a technology company is if you can reinvent yourself over and over. And I say, well, we'll watch and see, because it's one thing to reinvent yourself once, then twice, but do it 3, 4, 5 times. And this is a really competitive industry that we're in. And I think we do something very unique, because it's one thing to have technology, it is another to have the know-how on how to use it, right? So I feel what has made us distinctive while we've gone through all sorts of products, I think the one kind of silver thread is that we really do help change the way the world works. And I go back to the beginning in time, I mean, way back. IBM started, it wasn't IBM actually at the time, cheese meat slicers. Then it was clocks, tabulating. And then it was an era of, as you know, the mainframe, which was the back office. And then it reinvented itself again into software and into services. And now we reinvent ourselves again. And to me, that art of reinvention and that DNA is really what makes it unique.
Let's talk about your background for a moment. You grew up in Chicago, and you have three sisters?
2 sisters and a brother.
Two sisters and a brother.
Yes,
okay,
he's
3
a brother.
siblings.
Yeah.
And at one point, your father left your mother, and your mother was not college educated at the time.
Yeah.
So how did she support 4 children?
I continue to learn a lot from my mom, but I give my mom a lot of credit for all 4 of us in this. And that, as David said, my mother had a high school degree, but then quickly had us as children right after that. And I was in my early teens when my dad chose to leave. And it was sudden. And my mother found herself with 4 kids, no money, soon to be no home, soon to be no food. And she did, as I said, I learned, she was so intent on not letting other people define who she was. And we had to do some things for a short time. She had to go on food stamps. We had to get help. And that's what entitlement programs in this country are for in many ways. But she went back to school. I had to help. I was the oldest. She went back to school at night and learned a profession. In fact, she became head of the administration for the sleep clinic at Rush Presbyterian in Chicago. But a lot of people in family, like I think everyone's, they pitched in. And my mom, I think, really taught us. I always say the lesson I learned is never let someone else define who you are. She was never going to let that situation define who she was.
You were the babysitter for your 3...
I was. I've been to PTA meetings, bugle lessons, all sorts of things.
Did you get paid anything for the babysitting?
No, I didn't get paid. I probably should go sum that up.
You got a scholarship to go to Northwestern?
I did. Actually, I'm proud. My brothers and sisters all. I think we always said, My mom never complained, she never said much, but we all watched by what she did. And they've equal, I sometimes say I'm the underachiever. My 3 brothers and sisters have been incredibly successful. And that really is that work ethic my mom instilled in us. And so that to me is, so when I went to Northwestern, that was, and I did have a scholarship because we all looked for ways to do that and put ourselves through school.
Now, your mother is still alive. Does she call you and tell you how great you're doing, or she says your other siblings are doing just as well?
Yeah. Actually, she calls me and talks about, all things normal mothers talk about, right?
Okay. She doesn't ask about IBM?
Her biggest thing, this is a funny story about my mom. So this past Easter, she was at my house and I was having to leave in the middle of the day to get to the airport. And my mom says, hey, before you leave, I have your annual report and I've written you a little set of notes on it. I'm like, great, I'm even going to get a report card from my mother on this annual report. And, because the first thing like a mom does is she looks at the pictures. And then, but this year I was really quiet. My mom says, look, I loved this annual report. She goes, this annual report, I understand what IBM does. And it was 50 vignettes, 50 short little vignettes about how the world and professions and industries change because of Watson, about AI, about cloud computing, and how it'll make life better, right? My mom goes, this is, now I understand. And then she had some comments about the look and the paper type and other things. She gave me a report card on.
Did you give any of these comments to your colleagues back at IBM?
I gave them all, yeah, sure, yeah. I have a large retail shareholder base, yeah.
You graduated from Northwestern, and then, although you had a scholarship from General Motors, you weren't required to go work at General Motors, but you felt you should?
Yeah, this is, these are some schools, these are wonderful programs and from companies in that day and age. This was in an effort to get women and minorities into businesses. And at that time, General Motors had a program, which was, they went to some of what were the best schools and they said, gee, if I can get you, the deal was I'll pay your tuition, your room and board, everything. And someone going through school themselves, it was a professor who said to me, hey, you ought to go look at this program. And in return, worked there in the summers, otherwise no strings attached. So I had a wonderful set of internships with them. And then when I graduated, I did feel a real sense of obligation to first go to GM. I had lots of other offers, but to go to GM, I was a computer science and engineering degree. And
were there a lot of women taking those courses in those days at Northwestern?
What do you think?
Not that many?
No, I was probably the only woman in many of those classes, even then.
So you're at General Motors for a couple years, and then you hear of an opportunity to go to a company called IBM.
So this wasn't, as people sometimes think, do you have this long thought-out career plan? I'm sorry to tell you, it was, I had been working at General Motors, and while I liked what I was doing, I really felt, because I liked technology, it was this idea to be able to apply it to lots of different industries. And it was as simple as, my husband said, hey, look, I have a friend, and his dad works for IBM. Why don't you just call him? And actually, I think it was my husband that actually set the interview up, to be honest with you.
Did you get a finder's fee or anything from you?
Yeah, I'm still paying that finder's fee. So I went to the interview when I was hired.
What area were you initially?
I started out as a systems engineer. So I was a systems engineer, and I worked in banking, insurance, and I had many experiences through my years. And I remember I had gone into consulting, so I'd learned a lot of things. And it was time to do another job. And the story I always tell is that I worked for a gentleman, very good mentor, and he said to me, hey, I'm gonna get a new job, and you're gonna get my job. But you gotta go for an interview. You're one of the candidates, go to this interview. So I thought, so I go to the interview, and he tells me all about the job, and I'm sitting there and I think, boy, in my mind, I'm not sure I'm ready for this yet. This is a big job, right? Just a little more time and I would be ready. And I said to him, I said, well, may I go home and I would like to talk it over. Give me overnight to think about it. And I went home, and so I get home, and my husband, he's sitting there, and as usual, I always say, I'm talking, he's like, And I tell him about this interview. And I said, I wanted to go home and sleep on it. He goes, do you think the man would have answered that question that way? And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I said, no. And I went in the next day, and of course I took the job immediately. And the man who did my mentor, who suggested it, he said to me, he goes, don't do that again. I said, I understand. And it is what formed this basis for me that I think has guided my whole career, which is growth and comfort never coexist. And you have got to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's when you learn the most.
When you started doing these things, did you begin to think that there was a chance that you could be the CEO? Or do you think IBM, like many companies, were never going to make a woman CEO?
No, no, that never entered my mind that IBM would make a choice based on gender. Never. I mean, IBM has, for all my time there, has always been the most inclusive company I've known. So when you interview others, do they feel like I never thought about that. I always felt you do great in your current job, it earns you right to the next job.
When you're meeting with President Trump or other presidents, do you see that CEOs are willing to say, Mr. President, that's not a good idea, or let me give you my thought, and it might be different than yours?
My experience is that people are respectfully honest and give their opinions. And so just as if there are times with whether it's a president or prime minister, where we agree, and there'll be times we don't agree.
So let's talk about IBM for a moment. It is a hardware company, a software company, a consulting company. What would you say it really is today?
Keep going, right. And so, but I mean, I think that is, when I say first off, an enterprise company, right? We uniquely live at that intersection of tech and business. And then, as you said, we built over time hardware, then we layered it with software, we integrated onto that services, and now, as I say, we're becoming a cloud and a cognitive solutions company. And there will be another, sort of reinvention of IBM one day in the future again. But today it is about that. And it isn't about the technology. It's cloud, it's AI right now. It's the why. And as I say to all my colleagues, and I feel like we're the champion for business, right? The champion for business, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Right now, if you ask me to pick one word what IBM is reinventing around, I would tell you it's the word data. There is gold in that data, and to me, we are on the verge of companies being able to use all that. And this, to me, is companies to go on the offense now against startups, against disruption. You do it with that data, and you will need new tools, and that's where AI comes in.
One of the tools is what you call Watson.
Yep.
Now, Watson is named after?
Our founder, Thomas Watson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Watson got some attention because
of Jeopardy, the game
because
show.
Of Jeopardy.
It's funny how many people still remember that. And in fact, that was, I really give us credit, if I might, for having sort of relit the world of AI. You asked what I did early in my career. I was an AI specialist at one time. So that would be, a couple decades ago. So it isn't like AI itself is brand new. There's a number of things that make it different at this point in time. And what we did back then, it was 2011 with Jeopardy. We'd been working on AI for a good 5 years before. And this gets back to this idea of if you're always moving to where you think there's value in tech, we believed there'd be value in this data. And that you had to be prepared for this world to do it cost effectively. And more important, you would have to have technology that didn't get programmed. And that's the difference with that's what Watson and AI is, meaning what Watson does, you don't say, if this, do that. That's what every device you have has been programmed, if this, do that. Somebody had to tell it what to do. Your smartphone, you name it. Watson takes data of all kinds, understands reasons, and learns over that data, and that will help you make better decisions. This is an interesting stat I think we're sharing. In the world, we think there's a market of $2 trillion for making better business decisions. And some of it's rooted in, it's plain fundamental fact that when you and I make decisions, well, you may be better at this, David, but
not likely,
a third are right, a third are not optimal, and a third are wrong. It transcends everything.
Let's talk about the life of a CEO of a large company. How much time are you on the road traveling now?
Oh, they're probably 50%.
And customers, they're mostly interested in what? When you meet with them, you're trying to tell them why IBM is better than somebody else, or?
No.
No, you don't tell them that.
That, of course, always, in some way. But I think many clients look at us as a bit of a mirror image. I mean, I hear this from them, right? They're like, I can remember years ago, they'd be saying to me, wow, it's a lot of change. And I can remember saying, be careful, I think this is coming to a theater near you. And so this idea, I believe our transformation mirrors what every company is going through. You'll rebuild yourself around data and cloud. You're going to have to change how you do the work, and you're going to have to work on who the people are that do the work.
How do you measure your success as CEO? Is it share price? Is it earnings per share? revenue growth?
What I am most focused on, the board is most focused on, is transforming IBM for this next era, this next cognitive era. And so the sort of mileposts that we put out there is, as I said, part of the portfolio is we build new products and services, which is now 42% of IBM, which is $34 billion. It had double-digit growth. That is a very important set of new offerings that team created. At the same time, there's other things we do for clients. I mean, David, I think people forget we run the banks of the world, the railroads of the world, the airlines of the world. You know, it's 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And that's why I both mirror and help them transition to the future, run their current world, transition to the future, and become the future. And that is a really serious obligation. Some of that doesn't grow as fast as other pieces, and the new grows fast. But we, if anything, it is to help people transition era to era. So the measurement is as we build the new businesses and that we keep moving to higher value. That is our distinct value
But does
prop.
it bother you ever that you have more employees, more revenue, more customers all over the world than companies like, I assume, Apple or Amazon or Facebook, but they have higher market capitalizations? Does that strike you as unfair in some ways, or is this something you have to live with?
I always want to work on a higher market capitalization. So the unfair part, I don't feel these things are, as you say, sort of a burden in that way. Because what we do is different, right? And it is this combination of having technology and then know-how, which means you have both of those things together.
Well, in every country you visit around the world, I assume if you want to meet the Prime Minister, President, you have no problem getting in to do that?
Yeah, but you don't abuse that. I mean, there's some really important issues around the world, almost every government we talk to, around cybersecurity, very important issues around things like digital trade. And then the other one, it's been about workforce and skills. When you look at why is there divisions between people and why is there inequality, every time you will trace this back, and it will be about skills and opportunity. So that's what we've been working on.
When you're meeting with President Trump or other presidents, do you see that CEOs are willing to say, Mr. President, that's not a good idea, or let me give you my thought, it might be different than yours, or people that are kind of quiet when any president's around?
No, my experience is that people are respectfully honest and give their opinions. And so just as if there are times with whether it's a president, a prime minister, where we agree, and there'll be times we don't agree. And, you know, in our case here, as an example, with the Paris Agreement, we believed that America should stay in there. So we shared our viewpoints on that. The issues that are important, right, to our business and our clients.
Do you feel a certain responsibility as a woman CEO to mentor other women and to speak out on issues relating to women?
You always wanted to be noticed and rewarded for what you did, your contributions, you know, and I would always be, this has got nothing to do with gender, right? Almost blind to that. I really came to learn and see that how important it is that there be role models, and you have to accept the fact that you are a role model on the appropriate things.
So do you think that a woman to rise up to be the head of IBM had to be better than the men, or you think it really didn't make a difference?
I don't think in IBM it made a difference.
Your people who are subordinates who come to you and you don't like their ideas, do you ever, yell at them, scream at them, which men often do, or are you just more quiet about it and just tell them quietly that their idea isn't so good? How do you let people know you're not happy?
Well, I'm not a screamer, never was,
You
or
don't throw
anything like
things,
that.
nothing
No,
like that.
no, not a thrower. No, I don't think I've ever thrown anything. But I've always believed in the way to challenge things, it is to challenge them. It's the intellectual. And so I always feel, look, you need to know what you're talking about. And so to me, I have no trouble being the one to ask questions. And I think that's the best way to challenge things.
So do you feel a certain responsibility as a woman CEO to mentor other women and to speak out on issues relating to women?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, I think, David, because I have grown to be comfortable with that role, about being a role model. Because I think many of my colleagues would all say, and maybe it is a bit of, as we came through our businesses, you always wanted to be noticed and rewarded for what you did, your contributions, and I would always be, this has got nothing to do with gender, right? Almost blind to that. And over time, though, I really came to learn and see that how important it is that there be role models, and you have to accept the fact that you are a role model on the appropriate things. And so that too was kind of, at one point, another image that sticks out in my mind. This is maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was down in Australia. I was giving a financial services presentation. I thought I'd done a okay job at this. And a couple people came up to me afterwards, and this man, I thought, well, he's going to tell me either, this is great or he disagrees. And he said to me, looked at me, he said, I wish my daughters had been here. And it's funny, the sort of moments that you remember. And I always remember, I think, that's why you do have to realize, any of us in these positions of any kind of influence, we are a role model for someone, and women do need role models. We're still a small minority that run these companies. They need role models that say, yep, that's possible, I can be that. Because it's hard to dream to be something if you don't see other people like it. Are
you disappointed or surprised that if you take the Fortune 100 or Fortune 200 companies, there are relatively few female CEOs still?
Yeah, I would have hoped by now there would be more, right? And so I think this is very conscious effort. In fact, we make a very conscious effort. One of the biggest things is to keep women in the workforce. And so there is no doubt when women have children, they tend to, or ailing parents, there are many reasons that women will come in and come out of the workforce. And one of the things you can do is do everything you can to both keep them in. Your odds are much higher of their ability to then keep going. And one of our newest benefits is shipping breast milk for babies for mothers who are nursing, so they can keep working if they want to. And so this idea of keeping women in the workforce, to me, is one of the most important ways to then create the pipeline for these roles.
Now, IBM has a tradition of CEOs retiring earlier than other companies. Is your thinking that you will do it for a bit longer? And what would you do after you left as the current CEO?
Yeah, well, I always say I wasn't going to say my age, and then I'm always reminded it's public information, So, but it isn't. It's not a rule for us. It's not a steadfast rule. It has been some tradition, but I'm not retiring now. Okay. My work isn't done, okay. And so I'll still be here for quite a while. And what am I going to do then?
Would you ever go in the government or something?
Boy, I don't even think about that right now.
In the stay fit category, you are a.
Does that mean you think I look fit?
Well, you are fit.
Thank you. That's how you get a compliment.
You are fit, but you're a golfer.
Well, that doesn't keep you fit. My husband loves golf. I have great respect for golf as a sport and its long, really tradition history. I don't have the time to be very good. And so the other way I really do, people sort of don't think this is funny. The other thing I do is boxing. And so that's something I can do, short spurts on an everyday basis.
It's like somebody dress up like Apple or Microsoft, and they kind of have a Microsoft, and you get to box them, or you don't do that?
I do box with a person. The difference is he does not get to hit me.
Oh,
and so I only get to hit him.
So as you look back on your career, when you were in Northwestern, as you look back on it, what would you say is the secret of your having risen?
I think when I look back, and if someone said, if you had to only name one thing you did, I think it's this idea of being a constant learner, of always being willing to say to yourself, you don't know everything and you can learn something from whoever.
So when you finally do leave, and maybe many years from now, IBM, what would you like to see as your legacy?
Well, look, I think whether or not necessarily about IBM, that one more time reinvented for the next era, uniquely positioned at this technology and know-how, and that we do change, just like it was the moonshot or the Social Security system, that we've had that impact on healthcare, on education, on making this world safer, right? If we help the companies of this world both themselves reinvent and run better and have an impact on society, that's a great day.